Hi, Sparkles. This is episode 153 of the Intuitive Wisdom Podcast. Today, I'm sharing my conversation with yoga teacher Karen Fabian. My intention with inviting Karen onto the show was to talk about making your vision happen at any age. What I didn't expect, and what was better than I could have planned, was that Karen herself, in sharing her own story, is the inspiration for us all, as she calls it, to be the spark and to find freedom to work in different ways. Here we go. Hi, and welcome to Intuitive Wisdom. I am your host, Kay Margaret Solorio. I am an author, spiritual teacher, and certified Angel Reiki Master. I believe that all the answers you seek are inside you. When you learn to discern between the ego and the intuition, tune into spirit, you can hear that whisper, your intuitive wisdom, answering your questions and showing you the next right step. On this podcast, we explore that connection and the good that happens in the world when you learn to hear your intuition, trust your intuitive wisdom, and allow your magic. Quick announcements before we get to the inspiring interview. My book is now available on Amazon. I've created bonuses also, which are available on the website. So you can search Amazon and purchase the book, Make Ease Your Vibe, either in paperback or on Kindle. You can also search for my name, Kay Margaret Solorio. And if you go to the website, deliciousease.com, you can, after you purchase your copy, enter your name and email address, and I've created a chapter outline and bonuses to go with each chapter. Also, we've got our Center and Soul series that started on May 1st. If you haven't already, be sure to tune in. And you can go to deliciousease.com/center to sign up for a daily email with journal prompts to go with each of those mini episodes. The group sessions for May are now up and available for registration. If you would like to join for either our angel energy healing or live guided meditation, you can go to deliciousease.com/services. We are focusing this month on healing the mother wound, feelings of self-worth, and connecting with the Divine Mother. And last but not least, I have a new offer available for this month as well called Home Frequency Reset, an intuitive space clearing session designed to shift a stagnant energy and restore clarity, calm, and flow. Using a blend of sacred tools, sounds, herbs, guided intention, and intuitive insight, I help your space find its frequency again, one that supports peace, presence, and purpose. This is perfect for life transitions, a move, breakup, grief, a new start, feeling off in your space, or just a deep, energetic cleaning, fresh energy call-ins. So those are available local and in person or via distance. Pricing and contact information, again, can be found at my website, deliciousease.com. All right, let's get to the interview. Karen Fabian is the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. She has a background in yoga teaching, anatomy, and rehabilitative medicine through her initial clinical work as a social worker and rehabilitation counselor, and then over 20 years in a variety of healthcare business settings. Karen has her Bachelor of Science in Rehabilitation Counseling from Boston University, her Master's in Healthcare Administration from Simmons College, and is an experienced registered yoga teacher and was one of the first certified Baptiste yoga teachers. She also earned her Certified Personal Trainer certification through the National Association of Sports Medicine in May 2017 and is a CPT. All right, without further ado, here is my conversation with Karen. Welcome, Karen, again. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I am doing great. Sunny here in Boston after a couple days of rain, so that is a good thing.
That is a good thing. It's break.
Yeah,
Well,
where are you?
I'm in Northern California.
Oh, that's right. I did read that. Oh, yeah. So you probably are used to lovely weather.
Yes, we're pretty far north, so we get a rainy season in the winter.
Yeah.
But we do have a break. We have sunshine today too, which is really nice.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, on this podcast, you may know I like to explore the magic that happens when you learn to hear and trust your intuitive wisdom. So I was curious for you, what was one of the greatest insights you've received from your intuitive wisdom that you acted on?
Oh, gosh. I mean, my life is an illustration of acting on my intuitive wisdom.
Yay.
I mean, certainly I've had a number of different sort of epiphanies throughout my 60 years on this planet, but I would probably say the biggest one was leaving my corporate career to teach yoga as my full-time career. I don't even really think of it as a career or a job. It's a calling.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a listening to my intuition, because there was so much evidence in the 3D to the contrary that caused me to question, is that even a good idea? And yet, I can remember being in that yoga class, that first yoga class I took in 1999, where I felt that pull to do this. I was taking the class, and the whole time I was taking the class, I was thinking, this is my thing. This is what I am supposed to be doing in this life, even though my life at that time looked completely different. And so that really was the spark that lit the flame, that created a whole cascade of events and actions and results. And that led me to start my business. And that was a long time ago.
And that was that.
That, yeah. That was probably the biggest one. Throughout the years, I've had different sort of forks in the road that I arrived at. And interestingly, that was the beginning of going in a particular direction, leaving my corporate life, starting my business. The interesting thing was, after a number of years of doing that, I did bump up against a wall, in that I wasn't getting the results I wanted. I was falling into debt because I wasn't making enough money to cover my living expenses. And it got to a point where, again, in the 3D world, I had $30,000 of debt. I had burned through my $50,000 safety net, and I knew this was my calling, but I was getting all of this evidence that it wasn't working in the format that I was doing it in. And so it was sort of that battle between the logical part of my brain and the other sort of right-sided part of my brain. And I remember, again, these memories are just seared in my memory bank. I remember calling my parents and explaining where things were at. And my dad said, well, it looks like you're just going to have to go back to your corporate job, or a corporate job. And I just burst out into tears. I was like, there's no way. And I remember standing in my condo. Like, I can remember I can put myself in my body. I was standing in my condo. I was in the bedroom. I was looking at the brick wall. And I knew that he was right. I also knew that it wasn't the end of my dream. Mm-hmm. And so I did call my old boss, and I did go back to my corporate job. Although I kept teaching on the side, I did pay off the debt. And when I reemerged a couple years later, after having taught part-time for a while, I did it differently. Instead of doing it the way I had done it the first go round, which was working for a very well-known teacher under the umbrella of that person's business, I did it on my own. So I had my own brand, and I did my own thing. And it was, on some level, it was harder because I sort of couldn't leverage this other person's visibility and the opportunities I was given just because of my proximity to this person. It was all me. Now I was cold calling people and saying, hey, are you interested in bringing yoga into your workplace? Hey, I have experience working with children. Would you like to bring children's yoga into your preschool? Hey, I have a background in healthcare. Would you like to bring yoga into the hospital? There was a lot that I needed to be the spark. Mm-hmm. And that's how I sort of restructured things. And that really was the beginning of my business. The prior piece was sort of the beginning of something, the idea in concept, but it really was then that Bare Bones Yoga was born. And that was a long time ago. I look back and I'm glad for those moments. And I learned a lot along the way, and I'm really glad that it worked out the way it did. I did end up, one of the first books I wrote in part because I didn't want other yoga teachers to go through what I went through. I mean, building up that debt, sort of putting all my eggs in one basket, which was really this other person's business, is not a model I would recommend. And so that was really the genesis of the topic of my first book, to really share what I had gone through as a way to kind of say, hey, there's other things you can do on your own, and here's how to do it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing the whole story. And I think it's such a good one, it's incredibly inspirational, but two, it's such a good reminder that our we might get those nuggets and those hints of inspiration or intuition and calling for what we want to do, but that doesn't mean it automatically appears in the 3D world. Or when it comes, it doesn't come as you expect. Like that's just the first step.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, I met yesterday with a financial planner, sort of as a adult thing to do, because at some point, right now I work with my dad and he helps me manage my investments, and he is in his 80s. And I thought, I really would like to have a backup person. And so I had met with this person just to do, kind of some initial due diligence to meet this person. And in having a conversation with this young guy about my lifestyle, he was like, I don't actually understand what you're doing. Like, how could you leave a corporate job with a 6-figure salary? You're saying to teach yoga? It was this very interesting person,
Okay.
very ensconced in the 3D and trying to explain, what we're talking about here. He was pretty surprised.
That's good. I feel like people need to be surprised. I was just listening to a different podcast yesterday about that reference, like the educational system, and that we all kind of get conditioned for this, like, this is kind of what's expected of you at this age, or this is what it looks like. And so, yeah, it takes stepping out, because not only are you doing things on your own, but surely you have a completely different rhythm to your day than you did
Yes.
when it was in that structured corporate world. So it hits
Yeah.
in multiple ways.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I was in Starbucks last week and I offered the seat at my table to a guy who was coming in and was eating, he had ordered food and there was no place to sit. And long story short, he just got laid off after many years working for a well-known company here in the Massachusetts area. And so now he's retired at 63. And so he's sort of like a fish out of water. And it's been interesting over the past couple of days. I've run into him and we've had conversations. And for me, I'm used to sort of what you're talking about, setting my own rhythm, staying on task, and at the same time leaving time to do things like sit in Starbucks, and I journal, and I have a whole bunch of things I do. And when I run into him, he's like, I don't actually know what I'm supposed to be doing now. Like I would be retired at 63 and I want to do more. And so I've chatted with him a little bit because he wants to start a podcast and
Yay.
things. But yeah, that what you said, it reminds me of this person. It is sort of when you are following the path that you think is prescribed for you, and then the path is gone for whatever reason, it's like, okay, now what? And I agree. I think a lot of that, I was that person. Go to college, get a good job, all the things. And when I took that yoga class in 1999, I thought, uh-oh.
There's more.
Yeah. And I mean, I would have not, when I was in college, I would have not thought of myself as an entrepreneur. Now, granted, when I was in college a long time ago, entrepreneurship was not really a thing like it is now.
Mhm.
But now when I see young people, and I think if I was a young person now, even with a full-time job, I would be doing something on the side that's more in sync with maybe what I really love,
Mhm.
and just building that up just as a way to express myself, maybe in a way that feels more authentic to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm in the middle of that process right now. So I also love hearing it.
Yeah.
And I think it also speaks to how when you introduced yourself and you talked about having a career versus kind of being on the path and having a purpose, and that has no end, where like a job has an end and then you have this abrupt change. You're constantly just evolving and expressing yourself in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some people that work in jobs where there is a really close connection to their mission, to their purpose in life. I mean, I've certainly thought over the years as I've been working for myself, as things have been tough financially, I've thought several times, like, what kind of job could I have where I really believed in the mission? Like I was working, I think a lot about different nonprofits and different missions of nonprofits and different missions and things that align with me. So I think that's possible. I think for me, though, the work that I do is so closely tied to what I believe my purpose is in life, and it doesn't really fit into other more structured, business type jobs. So that's why I love the freedom to be able to create my own business. If I look at it through the lens of business, and I can look at it through that lens, I can also look at it through the lens of I'm helping people in a unique way that really highlights, in a lot of ways, my superpowers. I mean, one of my superpowers is making anatomy really easy to understand when yoga teachers feel like it's too hard to understand. And, my specialty is anatomy. You might have something really well that other people think is really hard to learn. A lot of people have that ability. I happen to have it around how the body moves. And in the context of teaching yoga, the better you understand that, it helps with how you teach your classes. Not even so much to impress people with your anatomy knowledge, more in how you feel. You feel more competent and more confident because you're teaching something that's coming from what you know, not just pretending and saying words and hoping that nobody really realizes that you don't really know what you're talking about.
I think it also on the receiving end, I've taken a few yoga classes where it's just helpful information when I'm getting to know my body and I'm doing stretches or poses and I didn't used to know internally what was happening, like where it helps to have that information because then you can visualize what you can't actually see and understand what's going on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've had many a conversation with students after class where they'll ask me about a cue I shared. And boy, wouldn't it be a bummer if I said, oh, well, that's what I was trained to say. I'm not really sure. Not that somebody would literally say that, but oftentimes that's the experience that teachers have because you can basically repeat a bunch of stuff. And it's not like people in class are going to say, I don't really think that's true, So there really is. Matter of fact, I was listening to a podcast the other day with a woman who I actually had on my podcast, and I could call her a vocal coach, but she's so much more than that. And she was talking about how when she works with somebody, she can hear in their voice the feelings that they might have as a person. So if I don't, in talking to you, if I don't really feel confident like I deserve to be here, you might pick that up in just hearing my voice. I think of that a lot when I make my videos and when I talk to teachers about when they're teaching their classes. One of the qualities of a really great cue is that there's conviction behind it. There's belief. I believe in what I'm saying. And that comes across totally differently than if I don't really understand what I'm talking about. Matter of fact, my voice might sort of go up a little bit, like I'm not really sure. There's all these little vocal tells, and that's a big part of connecting with people, is having people hear your voice and feel like, all right, I feel like this person knows what they're doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. You reminded me I once had a handwriting analysis done. I don't know if you've ever done that. And I was just floored by what he picked up and the loops and how I did that. And like I was told to write out a certain phrase or something that had all the letters, or I don't even know. But it invoked some memories as I was writing. And then those are things that came up in the reading. And I was like, this is amazing. But you're right. We have our our voice too that gives away more than maybe we even realize.
Totally, totally. I mean, even when I meet with teachers, especially if they enroll in my one-on-one program, a lot of the problems they'll share with me about teaching, which seem like tactical issues and skill-based issues, oftentimes are connected to things that they feel or limiting beliefs that they have about themselves. And there's something that is potentially quite triggering for people to walk into a room with people they don't know and teach this practice that's a blend of movement and also yoga philosophy, and it's been around for thousands of years. That particular movement discipline, different from other fitness things, can bring up a lot of insecurities in people. Like, I don't feel like I'm qualified to be here, and, all these other things. So similar to the handwriting analysis, when I work with a teacher, they might not even see it, but I can see by listening to the problems they're having and the beliefs they have about why they're teaching in that particular way, that underneath it, it might be connected to, well, I grew up in a home where I was really scrutinized in terms of my grades, and I really felt like there was a right way and a wrong way. And now I'm teaching yoga and I'm seeing all these people do these poses in lots of different ways. And I'm so worried somebody's going to get hurt. Like, those connections are there. So whether it's handwriting or teaching yoga or voice, what's going on under the surface sort of always finds its way out.
Yes. And as you were speaking, I was wondering, if yoga also, like dance, feels fairly intimate and it's very in person. And I was wondering if you've seen any change in your career as we get more attached to devices and screens and spend less time in person, if that's brought up more anxiety or more like, what's the right way of doing that? Like needing to learn those social cues or the delivery in the teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think since the pandemic, certainly during the pandemic, obviously we weren't teaching anybody in person. And so teachers pretty quickly had to learn how to teach online and how to connect with people online. And that was a whole different set of skills because just, you weren't able to be in the room with people. And since everything's pretty much gone back to being in person, one of the nice things is there are still students who can take classes online if for whatever reason they can't get to class. So I think on a practical level, it's nice from the consumer side of things.
Yes.
Teachers, though, one of the things that sort of never goes out of style is walking around the room and watching your students. And whether you're teaching online or teaching in person, I love to work with a yoga teacher who wants to be the kind of person who walks around the room and sees what's going on. Because when you're seeing what they're doing, that puts you at a point of view position where you can really speak to what you see and you can really be more helpful. A lot of yoga teachers practice with their class, and this may be your common experience when you go to a class. And what I often find when I work with somebody is it's really fear that blocks them from walking around the room.
Huh.
It's the fear of showing themselves, the fear of I'm going to forget my sequence, the fear of I'm not going to know how to share my cues, because they really are prompted by what I'm doing myself, what I feel in my own body. And so that idea of, I call it the walk and talk comes from both the tactical skill set part, but also the feeling part of me that wants to be seen, that wants to walk around, that is not afraid to do that. That is teaching something I know really well. So that's one aspect of in person that, and even when I teach online, that's what I do. So when somebody logs into my online class, I don't do a lot of them, but when I do teach online, I'll say right at the top, hey, by the way, I'm not going to do a lot of yoga, so feel free to just kind of get into your sequence, get into the flow, get into your body, get into your experience, and I'll guide you through it, type of thing.
Yeah. I'm curious from your perspective. So we've had a few other guests this year on the podcast who are yoga instructors, and they do yoga and something else. So yoga and branding or yoga and career pivots definitely seems like something that opens the door to more. I know yoga for you has then brought you closer to your clients in terms of, you already spoke to limiting beliefs or different fears to release as a teacher, but I'm curious if what connection you see as yoga being that platform to more.
Yoga being that platform to something else.
Something else. Yeah. Like not just yoga.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it depends on what the person feels called to do.
Okay.
There's sort of the model of I'm working a full-time job and I'm teaching some classes on the side. And that's fantastic. I mean, what we're going to talk about here, there's no good or bad or judgment on any of these sort of models. And, similar to what you were just sharing, the idea of yoga and branding, or I know some yoga teachers who, similar to me, have an online program. So a lot of what they do, similar to me, is they teach classes and they work with teachers who they train inside their program. So they've developed this sort of digital business side of things. There are teachers that teach in person and also teach online classes, and they sort of supplement their schedule with things they do online. I think one of the really cool things about being a yoga teacher is you have lots of different ways you can do it. You can exist in the world, you can express what you love. Prior to COVID, and even really a little before my online program picked up a lot, I had a whole portfolio of teaching opportunities that I had built up. And it was a wide range of things. I was teaching corporate yoga in offices. I was teaching children in different nonprofit settings. I was doing a yoga and story time model I had created in libraries around Boston. I was teaching regular classes. I was giving wellness presentations, in corporate settings. So there's lots of different things. And the thing I love about it is it's all connected to, again, sort of when we were talking at the beginning, what I love, how I love to exist in the world, things I love to share with people. Inevitably, when I go on vacation, if I go with a group of people, I'll end up teaching yoga classes. Like in the mornings, people are like, "Oh, we're traveling. There's a yoga teacher with us. Can you, And after class, we'll have conversations about different things about health and wellness. And I love that sort of thing. I love the freedom to be able to do it in different ways. And I think that's one of the really great things about when you work for yourself, you have that freedom to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like I could talk to you for a long time. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think in general, especially where your podcast is really focused on listening to your intuition, sort of listen. One of the things, for the listener is, and you probably speak on this, so maybe I'm sort of reiterating something you've said, the idea of hearing that voice. And two things that I've found really help me to do that is, the first one is to be in silence. This idea of we live in a world that's so noisy, and it's sometimes hard to really hear your intuitive voice when there's all this noise coming at you. So, especially for the listener who feels like maybe they're not doing exactly what they want to do with their life or their job, or they're at a crossroads. Maybe I work with a lot of women in my program who are in their 50s and early 60s, and they're retiring. They want to start teaching more. So they're at sort of that crossroads. So one of the things I would say is definitely spend a couple times a week, just sit at your desk or sit outside, or I don't want to call it meditation because sometimes people say I can't meditate. So just be in silence and see what comes up. And then the other thing is to write it down and to just take some time to just be with yourself. I mentioned I go to Starbucks, and oftentimes I associate going to Starbucks with bringing my journal. And I just spend some time, I'm out of my house, so I'm not thinking about dusting or doing whatever, or doing something at my computer. Just bring your journal and just start to write out, what do you want more of in your life? And that's sort of taking your intuitive signals and getting a little more specific about them. And then the last thing I'll say is, and this is something I can send you the link for, I don't know if I've sent you this. A lot of these things we're talking about really, especially for women, connect to how we feel about ourselves. And we feel more confident. We sort of have the fuel to do the things we want to do. So at the beginning of the year, I created this new framework called the confidence practice, and it's 6 different components. And I created this 5-day free challenge with a bunch of fun exercises, not physical exercises, that people can do to sort of experiment with different things for a 5-day period of time. So I'll give you the link, and anybody listening can just sign up for the 5-day confidence challenge.
Yeah,
and
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's some fun stuff that will hopefully boost their confidence.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Well, tell us the best place for people to connect with you and to follow your work.
Yeah, the absolute best place is Bare Bones Yoga. That is my brand. You can see it behind me on the banner there. I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Bare Bones Yoga. My website is barebonesyoga.com. My podcast is, if people are listening and are yoga teachers, Conversations for Yoga Teachers, but you can get to that right off the website. So just remember Bare Bones Yoga, and that's everything you need to know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. I really appreciated this conversation.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Hey, Sparkles. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Intuitive Wisdom Podcast. If you haven't already, click subscribe and follow. And if you love this episode, please leave a review and share it on Instagram and tag me at Delicious Ease. That's DELICIOUSEASE, so that I can say thank you. Every review helps another person find this podcast and learn to welcome their own intuitive wisdom. You can download your free 20-minute guided ideal day meditation on my website, deliciousease.com. Again, that's DELICIOUSEASE.com. And have you bought my book yet? Now available on Amazon, be sure to find my book, Make Ease Your Vibe, for mindset, energy, and time strategies that help you raise your vibration and enjoy the life you live. See you next week.